Hi guys, Gavin Allinson, and we're here in the labs at Oxford University. I've got Nick Norwitz, and Nick studied initially at Harvard, and he's over here in Oxford in the metabolism labs here, doing a PhD in ketone research. And what we just wanted to chat about today was ketones as a source of fuel, particularly for the brain. And there's been a lot of information and knowledge about that starting to come forward. One of the things mainly is things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease and lots of these other neurodegenerative diseases. So can you just give us the basics of how ketones differ to glucose as a fuel for the brain and some of the benefits there?
Absolutely, but before I do that, I just want to kind of frame the picture with an evolutionary perspective.
Okay.
To point out that the reason we make ketones in the first place is to fuel our brain. So when we were evolving, glucose wasn't around really in the diet much, or at least there'd be a lot of periods when you only have, say, meat, and or no food, and you're fasting.
Yeah.
And so your body then, because your brain is so energetically demanding, it weighs 2 pounds but consumes over 500 calories a day, and it can't use fat. Mm-hmm. So your body had.
Why can't it use fat? Because it can't access.
It can't really get. Yeah, your brain. The different cells can use different fuel sources, and your brain doesn't have the ability to use fat directly.
Okay.
At least in raw and stuff. And so what would have to happen is your body can do something called gluconeogenesis, which is a big word, but it basically means turning your lean tissue, like your muscle, including your heart muscle, into glucose. Okay. And so if your brain did this, what would happen very quickly is during a fast, you would lose all your muscle, your heart would stop pumping, your diaphragm would stop working, and you'd die very quickly, which is not what you want. Yeah. So the body evolved this really clever way to turn your body fat into a fuel that the brain can use, and that's ketones. That's why we evolved ketones, to generate a brain fuel, and that's why we survived our evolution.
So like a backup fuel, essentially.
Yeah.
Or maybe even a primary fuel when there wasn't enough
during that period of time. Yeah. So it evolved this optimal fuel for the brain, which is even better than what is kind of found in nature for the brain. And in terms of why it's optimal, which was kind of your question, I want to kind of break it down into two aspects. So it's a more efficient fuel for the brain, provides more energy, and it's a cleaner fuel for the brain.
Okay, so it provides more energy. People will say like a calorie is a calorie. How is it providing more energy then?
Okay, so to understand how it provides more energy, you kind of have to know how energy is generated in cells. Okay. So the basics of it are energy is generated in mitochondria. You've heard of mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. And what's happening is you have these electron carriers, and electrons are being passed along in a chain. Mm-hmm. And as they're passed along, they lose potential energy, and that's turned into the energy currency of the cell called ATP. Okay. So it's a little bit complicated if you don't know the biochemistry, but you can analogize this, it's called redox potential energy, to any sort of potential energy. So like gravitational potential energy. So let's talk about a bowling ball. Yeah. You have a bowling ball, you're holding it up here, and you're going to drop it to the ground. That's kind of the calorie as a calorie model. But what happens when you have ketones in the system is that the proteins that carry the electrons and transport them to each other, their ratios change, and effectively this increases the redox potential energy span, just like holding a bowling ball higher. Right. And so what happens is when you release it, when the bowling ball drops to the ground, you get a bigger boom when it hits the ground, so you get more energy. It's the same way with ketones. So you increase the energy between these electron carriers, so when the electrons drop to ground to generate ATP, you get more ATP. Okay. So it's a more efficient fuel, and this is in the brain, but it was, it's generalizable. It was actually shown by the senior person in our lab, Kieran Clarke, in 1995 in a landmark study using perfused rat hearts.
Okay, so they've known about this for a long time. This isn't new.
No.
But what's making it new is now there's a drinkable source that you can have, and then that's also helping fuel the interest in the actual people doing the diet as well.
Yes.
So
now there are, before it was just the diet or starvation, and it was used pretty effectively for, say, pediatric epilepsy was the first use case, but it's been used effectively for a lot of things. But now there are supplements. Okay. Exogenous ketones in the form of salts, in the form of esters, and some new research showing that you can use these as alternative fuels for the brain and things like Alzheimer's disease. So there was a famous case study, Mary Newport, 2015, where she gave her husband exogenous ketones, and his symptoms of Alzheimer's just remarkably improved. You can go online and read this case study. I think it's open access, and this is just one report because the research is new, but it's quite astonishing, and it makes sense.
Was that ketones or was that like the MCTs?
So she started out
with
coconut oil and stuff, but then she ended up giving him the ketones, and it progressively got better as his ketones got higher. And so, the coconut oil and the diet, it improved his condition, and it's done so for other neurological diseases like Parkinson's. That's actually what I researched. Okay. But the addition of the exogenous ketone, because you can really boost your ketone levels even higher, improve the symptoms even more. Okay, so it's when they're burned, you get more energy. That's what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are there any other advantages? They burn cleaner, don't they, as well? They do burn cleaner, and so that's the other thing to talk about. So maybe you've heard of oxidative stress. Yep. It's kind of a term that's bandied about. Basically, what it means is so we're talking about these electrons. They get passed along in the chain, and if they stay on the path, they get to the end and make energy. But what can happen is, just like a car engine, your mitochondria aren't perfectly efficient, and they generate byproducts. And one of these byproducts is called, or a type of byproduct, reactive oxygen species. So the electrons leak from the path, and they bind to oxygen-containing molecules, including oxygen itself. And that generates these reactive species that are kind of like a bull in a china shop. They bump around and harm everything. Your membranes, your proteins, even your DNA. Are these the same as free radicals or slightly different? So free radicals are kind of a bigger umbrella group, and then within that there are reactive oxygen species, which are... So people would know about free radicals and antioxidants and all that type of thing. Yeah, so I'll get to the ketones and antioxidants and stuff. So what happens with the ketones is that they reduce the generation of these reactive oxygen species. Okay. They do so by, again, changing the ratios of these electron carriers, which kind of create a pushing force, so they don't move. It's called the reverse electron transport, where they move back and they leak out, and so that doesn't happen. And so they can reduce the generation of oxidative radicals, but another thing they do when they're broken down is boost levels of a molecule called NADPH. P is important. And that is the foundation for all your antioxidant systems in the body. Okay. So, you take vitamin C, if you don't have good NADPH, it's useless. Right. So it bolsters everything: vitamin C, vitamin E, glutathione, thyroidoxins, whatever. And so, in addition to reducing oxidative stress, the generation of these reactive oxygen species... Let me stop you there, because I think a lot of people don't realise is that within our body, we've got our own antioxidant systems. They just think you've got to eat vegetables and... no, the ones in your body are actually much more potent, like glutathione. Right. Anyway, so the big picture is, and I'll stop, trying to use jargon, is the ketones are reducing the generation of these radicals, but they're also increasing the radical defenses. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch to really reduce oxidative damage. And this is particularly important in neurons, as opposed to anywhere else in the body, because your other cells, they turn over. Yeah, this was interesting. I didn't know this when I was just reading, because you've done a bit of a document here that we can leave that out. But you said that, sorry for butting in, but neurons are very long-lasting. Your brain cells are long-lasting. They don't get turned over like there are a small number of neuron types, like the ones in neurofactory centers for smell that do. But other than that, your neurons are basically with you the whole life. You're born with them, and then you have some neurogenesis when you're young, and you have a little bit when you're older. But the neurons that start in your brain, or when you're in your brain when you're young, they're there forever. Whereas red blood cells turn over. So you've got to really look after them. So you really have to look after them because they're mostly only going away. You can stimulate neurogenesis. Ketones can actually do that. We can talk about that in another little video. But the reason this is really important is because that means they accumulate damage. So you get these oxidative radicals, these reactive oxygen species, these free radicals. They damage the neurons. And not only does that damage accumulate, but it damages the neurons in such a way that they become even less, the mitochondria become less efficient. So the free radicals are generated in the mitochondria. They damage the mitochondrial proteins, and mitochondria have their own DNA too, which codes for the mitochondrial proteins. They damage that DNA, and then the mitochondria are less efficient. then they generate more radicals, which means which it's a feedback. It's a vicious cycle. And so you want to not let that vicious cycle establish.
So where does that vicious cycle becomes a problem because those mitochondria can't uptake glucose so well? Is that right? And they can uptake ketones, or that damage is happening anyway?
To some degree, you're going to get a little bit of damage no matter what. And new research says you can reverse it. You can get new mitochondria. You can actually get neurogenesis. So I'm oversimplifying a little bit. Okay. But the idea is you don't want to kind of spark this vicious cycle. Because it will happen, and over reliance on glucose is one thing that can stimulate it. And so then, it goes beyond the cell level. Why you become not great at using glucose, your brain has to do with insulin resistance. So changes in your hormones as well as things that are happening in your son. I don't really want to delve into that in this little video. We can talk about it another time because it's super fascinating. In fact, I think I shared with you, we had a review paper that kind of covered that, was published yesterday in Endocrinology. It's very dense.
It is dense. We're gonna have to take about 10 videos to go through that.
So I won't go there. We can post it along with it.
We'll do it another time.
It's called an integrated model of Alzheimer's disease, where it's talking about diabetes and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and how these things all kind of it's complicated.
Well, why don't we wrap this one up here for now? So what are the takeaway points? Are
3.
Okay.
So the ketones evolved as a brain fuel. So just from evolutionary logic, they're going to be a great brain fuel, and that they make more energy, and then they make cleaner energy, and so you're protecting your brain and fueling it better.
Excellent.
So those are the takeaways. Anyway, I hope that was interesting.
Yeah, excellent. I enjoyed it. Thanks, Nick.
Awesome.